You are welcome to part 2 of how to write a function. So in part 1, I explained why you need to write a function. So if you have a method that you know you want to repeat many times, you can save it as a function. All you have to do is to call the name of the function and Arrow will run the code for you. So you don't have to repeat the same method. So in the part 1 of this topic of how to write a function, I wrote a function for range. I also wrote a function for average. So now I want to write a function for the almighty formula that we use to solve a quadratic equation. So this is the formula. We know that if you want to get the root of a quadratic equation, you can use minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So let's write a function. So I want to write a function that I can use to solve any quadratic equation. So let me call it quadratic. You can use any name you want, quadratic. Then the first thing you have to do is function. The next thing, what are the variables? So what will be changing? The quadratic equation has a, b, and c. A is the coefficient of x squared. So let me write an example of a quadratic equation. So this is an example of a quadratic equation. We have a. So let me write it as 3x raised to the power 2 plus 4x minus 5. So looking at this, 3 is the coefficient of x squared. So 3 is called A, 4 is called B, minus 5 is called C. So we write quadratic equation as ax raised to the power 2 plus bx plus c. So the variables here, what variables mean what will be changing are a, b, and c. So once I know what a is, once I know what b is, once I know what c is, I should be able to know the root of the equation. So I will write all the variables in functions, so a, b, c. So these are the things that will be changing. In part 1, we only consider the case where we have just one variable that will be changing, which is the data. But in this case, we are moving from simple to medium to difficult, complex. So that's what we are doing. Back to the formula. So I'll be using this formula. So the first part, let me consider the numerator, or let me consider what I have in this square root. So what I have in this square root is b squared minus 4ac. I can call it ff. I just called it ff, anything you want. So this is how to write b squared. I can do b times b times b. So that is my b squared minus 4 times a times c. One thing you should know about arrow, if you write it as 4ac, arrow will give you an error message because arrow doesn't understand what 4ac is. So you have to write it as 4 times a times c. What I wrote now is what we have in the square root. That's what I wrote down. The next thing, let me call it fg. So what is fg? I want to take the square root of it. So fg is the square root. So the function for square root in R is sq root t, square root of ff. I'm using this to write a function for it. Then the next thing, I have to do this minus b plus what I have there. So let me get the first root. Let me call it. I want to get the first root, which is x1. So I'll do minus b plus. So this is how it is. So minus b plus all the square root of all this, then divided by 2a. So minus b plus fg. Remember the square root of all that, I've called it fg. Everything should be divided by, so I'll put it in a bracket, should be divided by 2 times a. Remember, you don't write 2a. Arrow doesn't understand what 2a is. You use 2 times a. And to get x2, the second root, we know in quadratic equation, this plus minus means you consider the plus, you repeat it the second time and consider the minus. So I can copy all this, paste, and change this plus now to minus. So that's what it is. let me write results. You can use any name you want. So I want to bind both results together. So I will use C bind or arrow bind. C bind means you want to bind it based on column or column wise. Arrow bind means you want to bind it based on row. X1, X2. So I want to see two results. So that's why if in the pattern of this training, I didn't use C bind because we only had one output. But in this case, we have two outputs. So I'm using C bind to combine both. Then the last step, you use return. Always end it with return. Return means what arrow will bring out whenever you run the function. So arrow should bring out my result. I can run my function. So we wrote a quadratic equation here. Can we try it? Let's see if it will work. Quadratic. So it will ask me, if you look at this, what is up here, what popped up, it will ask what A is, what B is, what C is. So I can write A is 3. I can write A is equal to 3, or I can decide not to write A equal to, I just write only the numbers. So what I mean is I can just write 3. So I'm using this, what we have in line 387. So I can just write it as 3, 4, and minus 5. So arrow will know that the first one is for A, second one is for B, the last one is for C. So when I run it, arrow gives me X1, arrow gives me X2. Or you can do it this way, quadratic. You can do it A, you can, to be more specific so you don't make any mistake. B is 4, I'm using line 387 to get my A, B, and C is minus 5. Run, I think we got the same answer. Now I don't need to bother myself writing the same code to look for a quadratic equation. I just wrote a simple code and it gave me a quadratic equation. So this is the part 2 of this video. I'm going to make more video on how to write functions. If you have any question, say it on the comment section. If you have any topic you want me to teach, also write it on the comment section. Like this video, share this video, and do well to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you.